Welcome to On to Better Things, the Portland Chapters. I'm your host, Frank Culbertson, and each week we dive into the stories of wrestlers who pass through Portland on their way to bigger stages. Today, we'll look at three men, David Schultz, Greg Valentine, and Austin Idol, each of whom made their mark here in different ways before moving on to national attention. David Schultz came to the Northwest in May of 1982, and from his very first matches, he left an impression. Wins over King Parsons, Siva Offee, Kurt Hennig, and Tommy Rogers showed that Schultz wasn't just passing through, he was making noise. Buddy Rose was one of the top stars in the territory at the time, often teaming with other heels, but Schultz wasn't interested in playing second fiddle. Instead, he clashed with Rose, and their feud quickly escalated. Cage matches, chain matches, two heels going to war. Schultz cut one of his most memorable promos in Portland wrestling history, warning fans, don't go jumping on the doctor's bus because he doesn't need you people. Behind the scenes, promoter Don Owen told Schultz to ease up. He was working too stiff and the other wrestlers were complaining, but the intensity was part of his appeal. Finally, in August of 1982, Schultz teamed with fan favorite Brett Sawyer to beat Buddy Rose and Rip Oliver inside a cage. Then, just like that, both Schultz and Rose were gone from the territory. Schultz was only here for 4 months, but the mark he left carried forward to the AWA and later WWF. Greg the Hammer Valentine's story in Portland goes back to 1973. He arrived young, raw, and still working out whether he'd be a babyface or a heel. His debut was unusual. He beat Ray Glenn, a wrestler who himself was working as a heel at the time. Valentine gave a serious interview, suggesting bigger plans, but Don Owen seems to be hedging his bets. Not long after, Valentine leaned into the heel role, teaming with Ripper Collins. Together, they made a dangerous team, winning the Hawaiian tag titles, though never quite capturing the Northwest tag belts. Valentine scored wins over names like Larry Whistler, better known later as Larry Zbyszko, Sandy Barr, and Haru Sasaki. Mike Rogers remembers seeing Valentine live in his hometown of Seaside during a battle royal where he and Jimmy Snuka ended up the final two men. They tested each other, pushed the match as far as they could, and eventually agreed to split the purse. Even then, Valentine showed the toughness and deliberate style that would later define his career. By Christmas of 1973, Jimmy Snuka had beaten Valentine in a Northwest title defense, and Valentine soon returned east under the name Johnny Fargo. He made one brief stop in Portland again in 1975, but his true rise would come later in the Carolinas and the WWF. Portland was only an early proving ground for the Hammer. And then there's Austin Idol, the one that got away. In June of 1978, Idol came to Portland and immediately connected with the fans. He had wins over Mike George, Ricky Hunter, Dutch Savage, and Johnny Eagles, and he was positioned for something really big. A feud with Jimmy Snuka seemed to be taking shape, but Idol was gone after just 6 weeks. Why? Idol later said he just didn't like Portland. It wasn't the weather, it was the fit. Still, the what-ifs are tantalizing. Imagine Idol teaming with Buddy Rose, only for the two to split in a feud. Imagine a young Roddy Piper, just months from his debut, crossing paths with Idol. The possibilities could have given Portland fans some unforgettable matches. Idol's story almost ended before it began. As Mike McCord, he was in the 1975 plane crash that killed Bobby Shane and left Idol with broken feet and ribs. He fought his way back, reinvented himself as Austin Idol, and became one of wrestling's biggest personalities of the 1980s. Portland was just a brief stop, but it was part of his long road of on to better things. That's it for this episode of On to Better Things, the Portland Chapters. 3 men, David Schultz, Greg Valentine, and Austin Idol, all spending time in Portland before moving on to national impact. I'm Frank Culbertson, and I want to thank you for joining me. Be sure to follow On to Better Things on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And new shows drop every Friday. On to Better Things, the Portland Chapters, is based on the book The Encyclopedia of Portland Wrestlers by historian Mike Rogers, available on Amazon. Get yours today.